Have you ever noticed how the most dangerous things often look the most inviting? Mount Whitney is the tallest peak in the lower 48 United States of America, but it doesn't feel like it should be deadly. It's well-trodden, accessible, just a hike, some people say, but they're wrong. At Everest Mystery, we explore why mountains pull us in and why they sometimes don't let us go. In this mountain, Mount Whitney, it's not just steep and barren and rocky, it's deceptive. This 14-year-old athlete started seeing snowmen and Kermit the Frog near 14,000 feet or 4,200 meters. Moments later, he walked off a cliff. But we'll get back to Zane in a few minutes. Before we get there, I want to show you what else the mountain has done and why so many people never see it coming. Mount Whitney is a bucket list summit for tens of thousands of hikers and climbers every year. But beneath the Instagram shots and summit signs is something far more serious. Of the 30,000 people who try it every year, only 10,000 get to the top. That's worse odds than if you were trying to climb Mount Everest by far. It lures in the unprepared and even the experienced. There's a mountaineer's route, and more than a few never make it back. The thing is, you don't need to have mountaineering skill to climb Mount Whitney. That's part of the problem. 14,505 feet or 4,421 meters. All you need is to be in good shape, have some endurance, and a permit. And get this, the one thing that most people never know before they get there, and most are completely unaware of, is whether they have a tolerance for altitude. The main trail to the summit is a 21-mile, 33-kilometer round-trip so-called day hike. It might take 12 to 16, sometimes more than 20 hours. Much of the hike done in darkness. In December 2024, 29-year-old Taylor Rodriguez decided he was up for a solo winter hike on Mount Whitney. He had no winter camping and no mountaineering experience, but still he drove from his home in San Antonio, Texas, with the intent to hike Mount Whitney. And a few days later, his family reported him missing. Taylor would never make it home. Search and rescue crews began searching for Taylor when the sheriff's office received a report that he was overdue. They were unclear about which route that Taylor had taken, and they noted that he had limited hiking experience and didn't have the proper gear. A few days later, Taylor's body was found near 12,000 feet, about 3,600 meters. The wind chill was well below zero. Ice was covering the trail. Many said he was a great guy. He was deeply loved, but the mountain is indifferent to who you are. Family and friends were devastated by the loss. He was a beloved friend, a hard worker, unprepared for the harsh reality of Mount Whitney. June 2019, Ling Dao, a marathon runner, he was a hiker, a father, summited Whitney. It was supposed to be a single-day challenge. Searchers spotted his bright orange jacket 3 days later, thousands of feet below the trail. Ling had flown from Las Vegas on June 11th. He had planned to summit Whitney on the 12th, then drive back to Vegas, catch a red-eye flight back home, so we could go to work the following day. Ling was reported missing to the Inyo County Sheriff's Office June 14th after not reporting for work. There was a lot more to Ling than his running. He was said to be always happy, funny, optimistic, and full of love for his family. Was always there with a helping hand, never asked for anything in return. He was fit, focused, and alone, and unprepared for the harsh reality of the mountain. The wilderness does not care how many miles you've logged. Sometimes all it takes is one misstep. In 2022, Maddie Riddles McGee was living her dream, hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. She had 2 engineering degrees and worked in biomechanics for the Philadelphia Phillies baseball team. She was smart, kind, said to be full of life, thriving on the trail. And then she climbed Mount Whitney, which is a side hike from the Pacific Crest Trail that many hikers choose to do for the challenge. At the top, friends noticed that her lips were actually turning blue. She was quiet. She had no appetite. She wasn't recovering well, but still she pressed on. And the next day, while back on the PCT at a place called Forester Pass, now this is the highest point on the Pacific Crest Trail, she collapsed. And despite CPR and help from fellow climbers, including a former emergency medical technician and doctor, Maddie didn't survive. She died of high-altitude pulmonary edema. There was no dramatic fall, no massive storm, just thin air. Altitude is silent and deadly. The only way to save her would have been to go straight down to lower altitude after climbing to the top and noticing her situation. That's the top of Mount Whitney. The air is thin. Oxygen drops to around 60% of sea levels. Your brain starts to fog. Muscles weaken. You might feel drunk, or you might feel okay right up until the time that you collapse. This is called altitude sickness, and it doesn't care how in shape or how fit you are or how desirous you are of getting to the top. In June of 2025, Zane Wach was 14 years old, hiking to the top of Mount Whitney with his dad. He was a strong, smart athlete, but when he reached high on Whitney, his mind stopped making sense. He saw things that weren't even there. Zane's altitude sickness started off not too severe, included symptoms like nausea and fatigue, his dad said, but things took a scary turn as they were trying to make their way back down the mountain. His dad was interviewed by the news shortly after, and he said that Zane started seeing things, like he began hallucinating, which of course worried his dad, but he wasn't aware that altitude sickness was setting in. His dad, Ryan, said that when Zane looked down and saw snow patches below, he thought they looked like snowmen. And then the green lakes in the distance, Zane said, "I see Kermit the Frog." Earlier in the descent, Ryan had encouraged his son to take a nap, hoping that he just overexerted himself and that he needed a break. While it helped in the short term, Zane's condition worsened. Ryan did a couple of interviews with news media explaining the confusion, not sure what was taking place. Obviously, they were both in phenomenal fitness and in a good place, at least psychologically, to go up the mountain, but certainly misunderstood the signs, the early onset and the later onset of altitude sickness. Ryan said it got worse and more frequent. And so after Ryan's dad encouraged him to take a nap, after about an hour, they reached what's known as Mount Whitney's trail camp. And then Zane began to drag his feet and stopped in his tracks. He told his dad, Ryan, he didn't want to go on anymore. And his dad thought, how odd, because my son's not a quitter. He surely was not reading the signs of altitude sickness. Then Zane refused to move further, started arguing with his dad. This was not reality. Thinking he needed more rest, Ryan instructed his son to take another nap since it had helped him feel better previously. After the second nap, he woke up worse than before and almost seemed to be sleepwalking. His dad said, quote, he was really pushing against me that this wasn't real, and a couple of times during the interaction made efforts to walk toward the edge. And then Ryan also said, quote, I was already quite scared at this point in time, never had encountered this sort of behavior in the mountains, let alone from his son Zane in any circumstance. Ryan was not prepared for what happened next. He said he took a moment just to rub his eyes. Zane was only about 10 feet away, and when he rubbed his eyes and took his hands away from his eyes, he watched as Zane stepped off a cliff, falling 120 feet down. That's about 40 meters. Ryan said he made a motion to try to grab Zane, but he was just too far away. Ryan could barely imagine his eyes when he saw that his son survived the fall, and shortly after got down to his son to try to render as much aid as he could. He was still breathing, and then the same emergency medical technician, the EMT who had helped earlier, immediately started assessing Zane's condition, began coordinating rescue efforts. Meanwhile, Ryan stayed by his son's side for 6 hours.
When we were on the mountain and I was holding him, I kept saying that I got you and I'm not going anywhere. And so I'll probably say I got you. I'm still not going anywhere.
Rescue teams arrived and flew him to the hospital. At that time, they put Zane under a medically induced coma with a breathing tube. Only a couple of days later, he was able to breathe on his own. At the time of the recording of this video, Zane Wach is still in the hospital. He has a long way to go to recover from this. It's still uncertain. There's not a lot of information out there on what's taking place. But for people who are moved by this very touching story, a loving dad and a strong young son, they have a GoFundMe page to help cover some of the expenses as Zane recovers in the hospital. These aren't stories of recklessness. These are stories of people unprepared and unaware of the extremely dangerous, the deadly signs of altitude sickness, even on a mountain during a day hike like Mount Whitney in California of the United States. Whitney is not a hike. And before you go, be prepared to take care of yourself in the event that you have altitude sickness. Learn the signs, do the research, and understand if you or one of your fellow climbers or another hiker on the trail starts showing symptoms of altitude sickness. Fitness will not save you from what you don't understand. Every season, loved ones wait for a text that never comes, a call that never rings. Their person was just out for a hike until they weren't. The mountain doesn't mourn, but people do. If stories like this matter to you, then please subscribe to the channel to help Everest Mystery grow. And for more in-depth explorations and behind-the-scenes content, check out the membership section where there's a lot of exclusive content, as well as our Patreon page, patreon.com/Everest Mystery. Thanks for being here. Above all, respect the mountain and do a good deed. Don't ask for anything in return. Make the world a better place, one tiny step at a time. Peace be with you.